Good evening. Welcome to the Meet and Greet Forum featuring your candidates for Clerk of the Court. The Clerk of the Court handles administrative matters for the court and has the authority to probate wills, appoint guardians, and determine how candidates for jury duty will be selected. The clerk's office also records deeds, issues marriage licenses, and grants administration of estates. I am Helen Kelly with the League of Women Voters of the Fairfax area, and I will be your moderator tonight. We are happy to have these co-sponsors for this event. The American Association of University Women, the Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, the Fairfax County Council of PTAs, and the Voice of Vietnamese Americans. We are all nonpartisan and nonprofit organizations. We thank Jim Southworth, Director of Technology at Fairfax and Technology Development at Fairfax Public Access Television, and his team for videotaping this event that he will upload to YouTube. And we thank the staff at FPA for making this broadcast possible. We also thank the two candidates, Bettina Lawton and John Frey, for taking their time to answer your questions. We also invited Marissa Wissar, but she could not come. The candidates will make 3-minute opening statements in the order in which their names appear on the ballot. They will have 2 minutes to answer each question, and I will alternate the order in which the candidates respond. Both candidates have agreed to these rules. If you have questions for the candidates in the studio, use the index cards provided. At home, please use the telephone number or the email address at the bottom of your screen. So let's get started. Ms. Lawton?
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for their sponsoring these events and for the volunteers at Fairfax Public Access for spending their time to take care of recording it and making it available to you. I am Bettina Lawton. I am the Democratic candidate for the Clerk of the Court in Fairfax County and Fairfax City. This is the first time I have ever run for office, and so I want to introduce myself to you. I am an attorney. I graduated from Georgetown University Law Center. After that, I went to work at the Securities and Exchange Commission investigating financial fraud and accounting irregularities. I spent a number of years as a partner at an international law firm where I defended people, again, in the financial and banking securities areas. After that, I decided to leave the big lights and big cities, and I came out here to Fairfax County about a dozen years ago in order to practice law. I've lived here since the early 90s. I do trust and estate planning. That's what I do. So I've continued to stay in the financial and accounting areas, helping people deal with what they have, how they want their lives to speak when they can no longer speak for themselves. All of the things that I've done in my career have related to finance and accounting, which is good because my undergraduate degree from Siena is in business administration with a major in accounting and a minor in finance, so it all works out. So why do I want to be the clerk of the court? Well, a lot of what the clerk does is financial and accounting and business and keeping records. But importantly, I view the clerk's office as a continuation of the work that I have been doing since I started practicing law to improve the administration of justice. When I was practicing in the District of Columbia, I was appointed by the judges there to the Gender Bias Task Force. It was one of the first ones in the nation, and we examined how women, both as attorneys, as employees, as witnesses, as parties, were treated in the court system. And we issued a marvelous report. Lots of training ensued, lots of changes were made. And I continued the work that I was doing in the improvement of justice through my work with the American Bar Association. I was a commissioner on the Commission for Women in the Profession, and I led task forces on how to improve women's participation in the legal profession. So this is a natural continuation of the work that I have been doing. I bring a different perspective to the court system. I bring a perspective that it needs to be more accessible to regular people in the community. That's what I am about. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Frey.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Hi, my name is John Frey. I am the Clerk of Court. For the last 24 years, I've had the honor and privilege of serving as your Clerk of Court here in Fairfax. Fairfax Circuit Court Clerk's Office is the largest circuit court in Virginia. Have a staff of 163 people and a budget of $10.6 million. We handle 25,000 new cases a year. That includes civil and criminal, and we have the original jurisdiction for all the felonies. But in addition to that, we do marriage licenses, business trade names, jury duty, land records, probate, concealed handgun permits, and a whole host of other things. I've been very fortunate to be the clerk for the last 24 years and to modernize the clerk's office. We've automated the probate system, the marriage license system, the jury management system, the land record system. I've been endorsed by the Northern Virginia Association of Realtors, and I've also been endorsed by the Fairfax County Chamber of Commerce BizPac. So for the last 24 years, you guys have placed your trust and confidence in me, and I ask that you continue to place your trust and confidence in me and vote for me on November 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now let's have the first question, sort of a utilitarian question. If elected, would you be willing to extend later hours or open the Clerk of the Court's office on Saturdays? Is that possible?
It is possible. One of the issues that we have is the fact that the court's office is only open from 8 to 4 Monday to Fridays. It is possible to open it on Saturdays. It is possible to have extended hours. There's a limit to what you can do if you extend the hours, and that's provided in the statute. So it could not be a full service opening of the court, but it would allow you to issue things like marriage licenses, fictitious name licenses, and a host of other things where you don't need the actual courts and the judges to be open. So that is something that I think we need to look into, because most people in Fairfax County are doing something else Monday to Friday, 8 to 4. And so it would be much more convenient if they were able to come to the courthouse to do their business at their own convenience.
Thank you. Mr. Frey?
Thank you. We've had over $800,000 in budget cuts since 2009. And so therefore, the idea of opening in the evenings and or on Saturdays and having to pay overtime is just really not possible at this time with the budget the way it is here in Fairfax County, with the schools looking at a $100 million shortfall. So I think it's very unrealistic. On the same time, we've been able to revolutionize the land records. All of our records going back to 1742 are digitized and online for attorneys, business people, the public. They have 24/7 access for that, so the title examiners can do their title searches from the home or the office. The actual settlement documents can be recorded, and so you don't even have to come to the courthouse to do a real estate transaction in Fairfax. We've automated the marriage license application, so to save time for people, they can go online and prepare and pre-do their marriage application, so when they walk in, all they have to do is take their oath and pay the $30 and they're on their way. So there's a lot of things that we've done over the years to make it more accessible, even without extending the hours.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Frey, you'll get this question first. Do you think it is important that employees in the office of the Clerk of the Court have the same rights at work as other Fairfax employees?
This is really a question about unions. And so the clerk's office does not have, we are not following all of the county procedures. We do the hiring and firing and follow the disciplinary rules, but what I don't have is a third-party grievance procedure. And that's not required by statute. Most people don't realize that the clerk of court is actually personally liable, both civilly and criminally, for the acts of their employees. So if you're going to be responsible for a $200 million court, then I really don't think that you want somebody to be able to be rehired if there's a problem and you've lost trust in them. So they have the same rights. The only rights that they don't have in my office is a third-party grievance procedure.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Lawton.
I think it's important for employees to have the ability to have someone else take a look at what is going on. I understand the concern that the current clerk has about that, but I think that having employees and trusting your employees and hiring them in a way and treating them in a way that they trust you back. I think that's an important part of the whole process. And so I have no problem with signing. It is not required. As a constitutional office, you're not required to have a grievance procedure, a third-party grievance procedure in place. But I think that it's a good idea. I know that the sheriff's office does, and I think that that's something that we ought to be able to have for our employees, and I have no problem agreeing to do that.
Thank you. Do you think, now you'll be first this time, do you think there should be more transparency in in the operation of the clerk of the court? And if so, where, in what areas?
I think there should be more transparency. I know when I started looking at the office and looking for certain information that it was pretty hard to find. I find that the website, it's very text heavy, but it doesn't tell me a lot of stuff. I've looked at some of the other clerks' websites in the state, for example, and there are some people who have annual reports that will tell you what they do every year and how many things they process and how many people they service. There are other folks who have much easier websites to read and better links, and I think all of those things would help increase the transparency in the office. It's very confusing for many people who go to the courthouse. It's a big courthouse. It's complicated to get around. We've had people that I know who've gone in and basically sort of wander around and go from one place to the next place to the next place trying to find out what it is they're looking for. So I think transparency is something that we need to do better in the clerk's office. We need to make information more easily accessible. You can, as my opponent said, access information 24/7 if you sign a bunch of agreements and pay $150 ahead of time, but most people don't have that kind of money just laying around. So I really think we need to become more transparent and more friendly to the people in Fairfax.
Mr. Frey.
I don't even know how to begin to respond by that. First of all, most of that information is available. I was the first clerk in the state to do procedural handouts for the public and to put not only back before the internet, we were putting them out in publications, and then we've put them all on the internet. When she talks about remote access and how to sign a bunch of agreements and pay $150, well, that's statutory. I mean, that's the whole thing, is for all this public information. There was a big fight in the General Assembly a couple years ago, and we almost lost remote access to court records. And so what happened is the General Assembly came to a compromise, and it was the Fairfax Compromise, because our court has been offering remote access since 1986. All right, and so we've always required a subscriber agreement, so it's a trusted agreement, so you know who your trusted partner is. And so with that partnership, then it is required by law that we charge a fee, because that's the General Assembly, and they wanted to make sure that people weren't spying on their neighbors. So we have a lot of transparency there. I've just won in 2013. I was honored by the Virginia Coalition for Open Government with an Open Government Award. So I believe the clerk's office is very much transparent, and I was one of the leaders in Virginia in putting stuff on the internet, procedural handouts for people, and actually a lot of the clerks around the states have copied our website. They call me up, they ask if they can use our website for theirs. So I think we do a great job. I'm proud to be your clerk, and I think we are very transparent. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Frey, you're first this time. What experience do you have with community outreach? How will you make the clerk's office more convenient for the public to deal with, including those for whom English is not their first language?
Well, we have interpreters, huge interpreters. The Supreme Court of Virginia has actually hired Spanish interpreters, but we have interpreters for Korean, Vietnamese, and a whole host of different languages. My staff is basically people from all over the world, from India, from China, from Venezuela, Guatemala. So we have people on staff that speak multiple languages and can help people through the trials and processes. It's not a fun place to be when you're in court, but it is very important that you have accessibility to these people. Everybody's needs need to be taken or need to be met, and I think the clerk's office does that.
Thank you. Ms. Lawton.
Well, in terms of community outreach, that's something that I have done a lot in my entire life. Certainly in the last dozen or so years since I have been in Fairfax County, I am always out into the community between a variety of chambers of commerce, business associations, including the minority chambers of commerce, the bar associations. I'm very active in the Rotary. I have been the president of my Rotary. I've been an assistant governor in the district. I'm doing my second term, actually my third term with an interruption of some years, as secretary of it. I go around all the time talking to people. I was president for a number of years of an organization called the Executive Women's Roundtable. So reaching out to the community is something that I think is important because the clerk is the only elected official that you have in the court system. And you need to be able to have access to that individual. That individual needs to know what's going on in the community, what your experience is in dealing with the court. Because if you aren't out there and people aren't talking to you about it, then you don't know what needs to be fixed. You don't know what's going really well. And I think that's something that everyone needs to have an opportunity to do, is to see the clerk out in the community talking with people. And it is very important to have multiple languages available. The clerk's website is all in English. And I think we need to look at links. It's great once you get to the courthouse that there are people who can help you there. But if you're trying to rely on the website to do that, it's a little difficult because it's all in English.
Thank you. If you are elected, what would be your highest priority for this job? I know there are over 200 things that the clerk's office does.
I think what I want to do when I become clerk is we need to take a look at the practices and the procedures, the business processes. There are a lot of things that the clerk of the court is responsible for doing. We are under some fiscal restraints. There is some flexibility that you can use in order to try and minimize any kind of impact. But you have to look and say, is there a better way to do some things? And coming from the outside and taking a fresh perspective of that, I think is important. So one of the first things that I will be doing is sitting down, talking to the people who are running the various divisions in the clerk's office about what they think could be done better, how things could be done more efficiently and more effectively in the clerk's office so that we can better serve the people in Fairfax County.
Thank you. Mr. Frey.
The clerk actually has over 800 statutory duties, not 200.
Okay.
In my 24 years as clerk, every time we've automated something, whether it was the land records, the courtrooms, the marriage license application, jury duty, we've sat down with staff and we've sat down with the bar and we've sat down with the judges and we've had them actually sit with the developers so that we've designed things that meets everybody's needs. If it doesn't meet my staff's needs, it's not going to work. If it doesn't meet the public's needs, it's not going to work. And so when you're spending millions of dollars over the years on these type of projects, it's important that you get all the users involved in making the decisions. And that's how I've made all my decisions here as clerk, and trying to involve line staff, management, judges, and the bar. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frey. Okay. I have a couple questions here that are asking about what would you initiate when it sounds like this isn't exactly your purview. Let me ask you this one. A gun shop just opened in McLean on Saturday. It will offer classes for concealed carry permits. Do you support legislation requiring concealed carry applicants to have additional gun handling training?
That's not a clerk's issue. We have to follow the law, just like with the gay marriage issue. It's not whether I believe it or not, it's what the law is. And so if the General Assembly says X, that's what we do. If the courts say Y, that's what we do. We did that with the gay marriage issue. We were told that we had to change the marriage forms. We had a couple hours notice. I pulled the team together. We got the vendor together, and my folks worked from 1 o'clock in the afternoon till 5 o'clock in the morning, updated the software, and we opened an hour early in case there were lines. And so that's how you respond to issues like this. It's not my purview. I did not run to be a House of Delegates member or a state senator to determine the gun rules in Virginia.
Thank you. Ms. Lawton.
The clerk does enforce the law and operate under the law that is currently existing. So the question, though, as I heard it, was would I support that type of change in how people can qualify to get concealed permits, which the court processes? And I assume that's why somebody has asked us the question. I do think that More training would be helpful. You are dealing with the General Assembly, and they tend to like to have people have guns. They've reversed a lot of the gun legislation over the last several years. But I do think that it would be useful. I know that in the classes that you take in order to qualify for a concealed weapons permit, you don't actually have to handle a weapon or show that you're proficient. And that seems to me a kind of a basic thing. Growing up, I was around guns a lot. My father was a life member of the NRA, and he taught the gun safety class, so I've had it. Many times, actually. But I do think that that's an important thing to have actual hands-on, and I certainly would support that. But as it is absolutely the case that whatever the General Assembly says is the rule, that's what we do.
Thank you. It says Virginia legal groups developed free legal an online tool to help people draft divorce papers without hiring a lawyer. Some clerks refer people to this tool. Do you or will you refer people to this tool?
I believe that it's important for people, particularly if you have an uncomplicated divorce. And I have heard of this do-it-yourself tool. It was publicized sometime over the summer. And if you qualify for it, and I am aware that other clerks in other parts of the state refer people to it. I know that there are certain bar associations down in the Richmond area, I believe, that have like seminars that try and help people figure this out, and that the judges like it because if you use this particular online tool, you then get some kind of standardized documents that are easy for the judges to deal with. I think that that's the type of thing that you have to look at and say, can we refer that over? Is that something that we ought to be talking to like the Fairfax Bar Association about? Because you have to be careful when you do any type of referral that the system you're actually sending somebody to is useful and accurate for producing the kinds of documents that the judges want to see. But I certainly wouldn't say no as a blank matter.
Thank you. Mr. Frey.
The clerk's office in Fairfax, under my leadership, was the very first clerk's office in the Commonwealth to put together a procedural manual for pro se divorces, and that's a pro se is someone without a lawyer. We work closely with the Fairfax Bar Association and Legal Services of Northern Virginia to try to help people get the proper help and to get the legal services that they need. And so having another tool, that's great. But again, with everything, I think the attorneys were very mad at me when I first came out with that procedural handout. And what happened then was that after a while, they realized that, hey, wait a second, people are reading this and then they're calling for a lawyer because they see it is complicated. So not every single divorce case is simple, and most of the times people do need a lawyer.
Thank you. One more question, and I think that we're going to have to do it in 1 minute instead of 2 minutes. Why is the process for a newly married woman so complex to assume her husband's name, requiring a petition to the courts? The marriage license should be sufficient.
Will you repeat the question?
Okay,
I don't think
perhaps that's not your area.
No, I don't think that's the way it is in Virginia.
Okay.
You can change your name at the time. You don't have to take the husband's name when you get married in Virginia. You can. They need a petition in order later on if they choose not to or want to change their name back. All right.
I think this person is probably confused then.
Well, that's exactly right. And I do know that the name change documents are on the website, so that it's a relatively easy process. It's relatively cheap, so it's really not a big problem in Fairfax.
Thank you. All right. Let's try to fit one more in at 1 minute. What would be your highest priority for using technology to improve the efficiency of the clerk's office?
Well, in a minute or less. I think that it is looking at the technology and upgrading it. I have heard people talk to me about that the technology is old. I know that it has been regularly updated. I know that it does a lot of terrific things, but there are people in my going around and talking at different places where people have expressed to me some issues with it. So I think we've got to find out, what is it? Is it the best out there? And then make sure we have it.
Thank you. Mr. Frey.
Well, I think with the technology, the thing that I would like to see, and we've been working on for a number of years, is to get the e-filing on the court side. We've got e-filing in land records. Any kind of settlement document can be recorded. We want to do that on the court side. We're probably about a year away, but we've been doing a number of things. We've got some of the judges signing orders with e-signatures, and we're working with the workflow and so forth. But again, it's a cost, and how much money it costs to put in an e-filing system. But we've got courts from all around the world, not just the United States, but all around the world, coming to Fairfax to see how we do business. We are a leader around the world. And so we just had a Nigerian delegation and a Chinese delegation come in to visit us in the last 6 months. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions we have time for. I want to thank both of you for a very interesting discussion, and I thank you for giving us your time. It was very nice. It was an interesting discussion, and I want to thank the audience for watching and sending us their questions. But we're definitely grateful to both our candidates. We also thank our co-sponsors and the staff at Fairfax Public Access Television for making this broadcast possible, and we thank all of you at home for watching and sending in questions. Remember that your vote is your voice in the community. The local officials actually have more control over your daily life than the president does. So we ask you to let your public officials know how you feel about the issues. And please vote on November 3rd. We really appreciate your being here this evening. Thank you very much to everyone who participated, the candidates, the audience, the volunteers, and the technicians. We appreciate all that you have done. We think it's a public service. Thank you very much. Okay. What's up? Oh, there you go. Are we ready? Okay. Good evening, and welcome to our meet and greet forum featuring your candidates for sheriff. The Sheriff's Office provides three main areas of service to our community: managing the Adult Detention Center, security in the courthouses, and serving the civil law process. Sheriff's deputies help the county police, the U.S. Marshals Service, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation in a joint fugitive task force that apprehends and arrests felons who face current warrants. I am Helen Kelly and with the League of Women Voters of the Fairfax area, and I will be your moderator this evening. We are proud to have these co-sponsors for this event: the American Association of University Women of Virginia, the Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, the Fairfax County Council of PTAs, and the Voice of Vietnamese Americans. We thank Jim Southworth, Director of Technology Development at Fairfax Public Access Television, and his team for videotaping this event that he will upload to YouTube. And we thank the staff at FPA for making this broadcast possible. We also thank our two candidates, Stacey Kincaid and Challenger Brian Wolf, for taking time to answer your questions. The candidates will make 3-minute opening statements in the order in which their names appear on the ballot. They will have 2 minutes to answer each question, and after the first question, I will alternate the order in which the candidates respond. The candidates have both agreed to these rules. If you have questions for the candidates in the studio, use the index cards. At home, use the telephone number or the email address at the bottom of your screen. Let's get started. Ms. Kincaid?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Stacey Kincaid, and I am proud to serve as your sheriff. 28 years ago, I became a deputy sheriff right out of college. Through hard work, dedication, and innovative thinking, I rose to the rank of captain before running for sheriff in 2013. I've dedicated my entire career to the sheriff's office, as well as serving the residents of both Fairfax County and the city of Fairfax. Earlier this year, a terrible tragedy occurred in our adult detention center. Natasha McKenna, an inmate who was suffering from mental illness, died while in our custody. This is something that continues to weigh very heavily on me, and we are putting in place procedures and policies to ensure that this never happens again. We have made many accomplishments in a very short period of time, and I am running for re-election because there is still more work that needs to be done. Approximately half of our inmate population suffers from some type of mental illness and or co-occurring substance use disorder. In my first couple weeks as sheriff, I changed the release time for inmates from midnight till 8 o'clock in the morning, so transportation, housing, and mental health services were more readily available. I also relocated the women inmates that suffer from mental illness to a housing location that was more therapeutic for treatment and closer to our mental health staff. I've suspended the use of tasers in the jail. We are currently reviewing the medical and mental health practices that are administered and delivered to our inmate population. I've also implemented telepsychiatry, so inmates experiencing mental health crisis have access to a psychiatrist 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Outside of what I've done in the jail, I've spearheaded Diversion First, which is a county collaborative initiative that focuses on diverting nonviolent offenders who are suffering from mental illness into treatment as opposed to bringing them into jail. In addition, I've implemented enhanced crisis intervention team training that is tailored and focused to a correctional environment. And finally, I've implemented mandatory mental health first aid training to all of my staff. I meet regularly with mental health advocates, consumers, and their family to learn of their experiences and to ensure that we're able to provide better services within our community. In moving forward, my initiatives are threefold. I will continue focusing on mental health reform, also reentry for inmates to ensure that they are successful upon release, and then staff training to ensure that our staff receive the best practices. And I ask for your vote on November 3rd, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Wolf.
Hello, and greetings, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for having me and all the sponsors. I appreciate all the citizens that are in the audience tonight and the viewers that are at home, which gives me an indication that you have care for the community and that you also have care for the Sheriff's Office, which typically doesn't get a lot of press. I applaud the Sheriff today for bringing foremost the biggest reason why I'm running against Stacey for Sheriff again. I'd like to go ahead and say that when I did choose to run 2 years ago, that I did an analysis on the department and I determined that there were some critical areas that were in need of repair. And through my 30 years of career law enforcement, I understood that mental health is a severe problem with people that are suffering from mental illness and that they're basically just tied up in the criminal justice system. As my platform items back in 2013, I made it very clear, and I do like to use visual aids, so please bear with me. Because when I say something, I like to make sure it's backed up. But I did make, and only 3 articles that are in local papers, with the Fairfax Times, the Washington Post, and the Connection, that my only 2 key platform items were crisis intervention training and installing cameras in the jail to make us more transparent, more accountable, and to let the citizens know what we do on a daily basis. This was a critical need back in 2013, and my opponent, Stacey, either didn't understand what critical or crisis intervention training was, but basically dismissed it. And in her own words, she basically said that it's not appropriate for a jail setting. We rely on the CSB, the Community Services Board. In the Natasha incident, the CSB was not even present on that scene. There was nobody that had crisis intervention training. It's a terrible tragedy. I tried to prevent that. I think CIT could have basically prevented that incident. Poor Natasha called the police for help, and she ended up dead. There's a woman that doesn't have a daughter, and then there's a little daughter that doesn't have a mommy right now. I'm asking for your support. I gave the sheriff warnings. In 2013, she still has the lowest amount of officers trained in CIT. She hasn't been truthful. She hasn't been transparent. The Washington Post, which I rely on, is a very independent newspaper. They haven't written one positive article on our sheriff in 15 articles. Thank you so much.
Thank you. With all the talk about budgets, I'd like to ask, what are your funding priorities? And how would you implement budget reduction if required?
The Sheriff's Office, we have a $63 million budget, and our priorities right now are focused on mental health and jail diversion. 75% of our budget comes from the county resources, where 25% comes from the state. Our budget is one of the most leanest budgets out of all of public safety. Each year, we actually receive money back, we return money back to the county as opposed to spending it. In addition, in reference to our security upgrade, which back in June of 2014, we were in desperate need for an upgraded security system. This is something that just didn't happen a couple of years ago. This is something that we've been in need of for over 15 years. So I recently asked the county executive and senior management, senior leadership staff for $10 million so we could have the best possible security equipment that is needed for a correctional facility. Most recently, we were able to receive funding so we can have a security study conducted, because the infrastructure in our jail is extremely complicated, where we have 4 different areas that have been built during different periods of time, and it's important that we are able to have the best possible upgrade with security and communication. So that's where our funding is going to be focused on, aside from mental illness, and ensuring that we're able to properly divert those individuals that so desperately need treatment.
Thank you. Mr. Wool.
Thank you. I'm going to be rather brief on this topic, and if I could just go ahead and explain some responsibilities of any municipality law enforcement agency to be accredited, which the Sheriff's Office is accredited, just like Fairfax County, Loudoun County, Arlington and Alexandria, Stafford. Everybody is an accredited agency. Part of that accreditation is to inform citizens of what they are doing with their budget, their successes in their programs, their failures in their programs. It's a key portion of notifying the citizens. It's the biggest form of being transparent that you can. I knew Stan Berry for 20 years. He always had an annual report attached to his website. The very first time Sheriff Kincaid was in charge of our jail, or our sheriff's office, there was no annual report. I find that very disturbing. This was her chance to show what she's been doing while she's been in office. That report was due February of 2014, and it's not there. For the longest time, their 2013 annual report was available online. Folks, this is exactly what I'm talking about. If you want to know what your tax dollars are being spent on, I would like to know how I could even effectively campaign against the sheriff. But if I don't even know what our budget is, I don't even know if she is really implementing crisis intervention team training. I don't know whether there's downfalls in the department. I don't know what her key motives and her initiatives are. It's very disturbing, and it goes against all the accreditation that the department has.
Thank you. Now you'll answer the next question first. What are your views on domestic violence, and have you ever been involved in a domestic violence situation or an incident where the police had to interfere?
Domestic violence is covered by Virginia Code. There really isn't any kind of leeway when an officer arrives on a scene right now. In my very early years in the career, the officer was able to determine probable cause or reasonable suspicion on which party was essentially the aggressor, and we arrested them. And I've got to tell you, back in my early days, there was a lot of days we would just suggest to folks to split that night, and hopefully that they would split and the other party wouldn't return and there wouldn't be any disturbances. Now the Virginia Code requires that it's pro-arrest. There has to be an arrest if there's reasonable suspicion or probable cause that there was an aggressor. I firmly believe in that policy, and I know that most officers basically follow that code section.
Thank you. Ms. Kincaid.
We take domestic violence very, very serious in the sheriff's office. I have never been involved in a domestic violence situation where the police were called to my home. I can tell you that it's important, and we have begun actually bringing in training for our inmate population, because we have not only the females but the males that are both victims as well as perpetrators. And it's very important that we ensure that we provide the education, because domestic violence is not okay. Also with our training is additional information on finance abuse, because often there are individuals that come into contact with criminal justice that unfortunately have had a bad experience with their spouse, their loved one, their partner. So again, we take this opportunity to educate the individuals that are incarcerated so that when they go back into the community, they have additional information and skills and tools that will help them be successful upon their reentry.
Thank you. You go first this time. Please describe how you would improve inmate access to community services in the adult detention center, other than what you mentioned. Do you have anything else?
Sure. Aside from the programs that we currently have, we held our first inmate resource fair in 271 years, our first inmate resource fair back in early 2014. This inmate resource fair provided over 200 inmates with the resources to help them so when they go back into the community, again, they have an opportunity to be successful. Some of the government and nonprofit agencies that showed up were part of that focused on probation and parole, mental health, job skills, as well as employment, as well as DMV. We are now going to implement DMV, or allow DMV to come into our facility to provide identification cards for our inmates. How could you imagine being locked up in jail, having no identification card, and all of a sudden you go back out in the community? So this is something that I have been very proactive about. In fact, we're having our next inmate resource fair on October 8th. And this is something that has proven and will continue to prove very helpful because, again, we are helping our incarcerated individuals, which, again, they're family members, they're friends, they're neighbors. We know somebody who has been locked up.
Thank you. Mr. Wolf.
I hate to keep on going back to the annual report, but that's exactly, Sheriff, what I think the citizens would have loved to have been informed in by this annual report. I did hear a couple stories within our local papers, The Connection and Fairfax Times, about some new initiatives, but I didn't really get the success or the failure rates. I hate to keep on reiterating on this annual report, but those are the items that the sheriff should want to brag about. And I just don't know why the annual report wasn't completed. Perhaps the sheriff could answer that question in her next answer.
Thank you. I was going to ask about this. One of the things you do is courtroom security. And so I was wondering, do you anticipate any problems staffing the courthouses and the courtrooms and supplying this security?
Well, thank you for asking for that question. I do have contact with deputies. There are deputies that want to remain anonymous, and unfortunately they have to stay anonymous because they feel like any support that they want to give to an opponent and not the incumbent, that they will be retaliated at. So most of my sources remain anonymous, and it's very enlightening, ma'am, that courtroom security has been on their minds, and that there is a shortage. And going back to the report, last year they said they were fully staffed and they weren't even accepting applications. So I'd like to know why we have a shortage in the courtrooms, and it is on the deputies' minds, and courtroom security is imperative. Judges need the security, the defendants, plaintiffs, jury members, and anybody conducting any kind of business at the courthouse. It's imperative that we have courtroom security. That's one of our key goals.
Thank you. Ms. Kincaid.
Each year when it comes to budget time, one of the first choices previously in the sheriff's office was to cut court security in our civil courtrooms. When I was elected in 2013, I met with all of the judges and explained to them that that was not going to be the case. We were not going to use that leverage to let the judges know that we were not going to staff civil courts, because we don't have to. We really don't. But it's important because oftentimes the problems that arise from civil courts with property, with landlord-tenant, it's important that we have a presence in the courtroom. So every courtroom is staffed with a deputy sheriff. We've also gone above that to ensure that we provide training, not only additional training for staff, but we've been very proactive with training for our judges, active shooter training, as well as civilian staff. It's not a matter of when. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. This is the first time in the history that the sheriff's office has been this proactive in providing the services to our stakeholders in the court and ensuring that every courthouse is staffed by a deputy sheriff.
Thank you. Are you willing to do a similar review commission for the Sheriff's Department like the Ad Hoc Commission on Police Procedures and Priorities? If yes, why? If not, why not?
Well, we already have representation on the Ad Hoc Commission. In fact, one of my majors has been there since day one. We also have representation on the Mental Health Subcommittee because it is very important. Inside the Sheriff's Office, we've implemented a committee to study some of the issues that have come up, especially with matters with use of force as well as mental health. So we're always willing to be a part of something in order to follow and do best practices and ensure that we run a very safe and secure agency.
Thank you. Mr. Wolf.
Could I have the question one more time, ma'am?
Okay. Are you willing to do a similar review commission for the Sheriff's Department like the Ad Hoc Commission on Police Procedures and Priorities?
I certainly am. The community, not just in Fairfax, across the nation, have become appalled with the sensationalizing of the media. And when we can turn on almost the news every day, we can see examples of poor police misconduct. And that's become available because everybody now has a camera on their phone. And I welcome that. I welcome witnesses to watch what we do. And I believe it does capture probably 99% of good conduct by police officers, but that's not newsworthy. But I'm willing to accept that 1% of bad conduct. We need to have community involvement to ensure that we are following our SOPs, our standard operating procedures, or our general orders. I welcome that. That's part of my initiative for cameras. If we can't have total participation in a review committee, I want people to be able to, at any time, be able to see what we do, whether it's good or bad. The cameras also cover not only the safety of the deputies, but the safety of the inmates. So I'm trying to be as transparent as I can. There's nothing in the Sheriff's Office that you'll have to FOIA from me. You're entitled to that information, and you'll get it.
Thank you. Okay. Please describe how you would or have increased representation of different communities in staffing the Sheriff's Department. How have you or will you address opportunities for women?
When I was in Fairfax City Police, I was in charge of our applicant section for 4 years, and we always found it that the internet, advertising, job fairs always attracted minorities, women, and people across just not our community, but across the state and basically nationally. People want to work here. Fairfax is a good place to work. It's a safe place to work. It's great departments. And this is an opportunity for me to tell you that I am proud of the Fairfax County Police Department, and I'm proud of the deputies. I'm not too proud about the leadership, but there is an attraction for people that want to work here. When I ran in 2013, I believe their Lieutenant Colonel, I can't remember his name, but he provided some data that showed that across the Sheriff's Office, they were represented very well with minorities and females.
Okay. Ms. Kincaid. Please describe how you have or would increase representation of different communities in staffing the Sheriff's Office.
Well, in my short period serving as your sheriff, I have increased community outreach over 100%. I go out into the community, I meet with community leaders. Each time I go and speak in front of groups, in front of children, in front of festivals, at rotaries, at mosques, at churches, at synagogues, I always ask and let people know about what we do and offer people the opportunity to come be a part of our agency. whether it is with our Reserve Deputy Sheriff program, whether it's with volunteering. I am proud that we have over 300 volunteers in our agency. We are very diverse. We are one of the most diverse public safety agencies out of Northern Virginia. I was very proud to promote only the second African-American woman to the rank of captain, again, in 271 years. I've changed the promotion process to ensure that everyone has an opportunity. Everyone knows what's expected of them. There's no more subjective where we vote by committee. Everyone knows what's expected. Everyone has the opportunity to move up in the rank structure. As far as job fairs are concerned, again, we go out into the community. People request us, we go out, we meet with them, and we have done one heck of a job since I have taken office in opening up the sheriff's office and letting people know what it is that we do.
Thank you very much. I want to thank both of the candidates for taking their time to answer our questions. And I want to thank our co-sponsors and all the staff at Fairfax Public Access Television. And we thank all of you for watching and for sending in questions. Remember that your vote is your voice in the community. Please let your elected officials know how you feel about the issues, and please vote on November 3rd. Thank you very much. To the Meet and Greet Forum featuring your candidates for Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation Director. The Soil and Water Conservation District is not a regulatory agency. It works with Fairfax County and other partners to provide conservation information, technical services, educational programs, and volunteer opportunities to residents on many aspects of water quality, non-point source pollution, and stream health. I am Helen Kelly with the League of Women Voters of the Fairfax area, and I will be your moderator this evening. We are pleased to have these co-sponsors for this event: the American Association of University Women, the Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, the Fairfax County Council of PTAs, and the Voice of Vietnamese Americans. We are all nonpartisan and nonprofit organizations. We thank Jim Southworth, Director of Technology Development at Fairfax Public Access Television, and his team for videotaping this event that he will upload to YouTube. And we thank all the staff at FPA for making this broadcast possible. We also thank our three candidates, Scott Cameron, George Lamb, and Gerald Peters, for being here tonight. We invited all the candidates to appear, but Mr. Pashore couldn't make it. Candidates will make 2-minute opening statements in the order in which their names appear on the ballot. We'll start with 2 minutes to answer each question. I will alternate the order in which you answer the questions, and all the candidates have agreed to these rules. If you in the audience have questions, in the studio, use index cards. At home, use the email address or the telephone number at the bottom of your screen. So let's get started. Introductory statement.
Thank you very much, and good evening. I'm delighted to be here. My name is Scott Cameron. I want to thank the League of Women Voters and the other sponsors for making this opportunity available to us tonight. I've lived in Northern Virginia for the last 36 years, ever since I graduated from college. My entire career has involved natural resource and environmental policy. I was a federal employee for 20 years at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Department of the Interior, congressional staffer, worked in various nonprofit organizations dealing with the environment. So the subject matter of the Soil and Water Conservation Board has been something that I've been dealing with for my entire career. For the last 18 months, I've been attending almost all of the monthly meetings of the Soil and Water Conservation Board because I wanted to find out what the board was all about, what its mission was, what its programs are. I've concluded during that period of time that I have something to contribute to the future of the board and to the environmental values of Fairfax County. I'm pleased to say that the board chose to make me an associate director in the very early part of 2015. And most recently, I've been endorsed by the Fairfax League of Conservation Voters. So why am I running? What would I plan to do? My two practical priorities would be to make sure that the board in its own activities and to the extent it can influence the activities of other county programs is spending your taxpayer dollars in a way that will produce the greatest environmental benefit. I'm also interested in putting more emphasis on invasive species issues that are clogging our waterways, hurting our parks and forests, and threatening our neighborhood trees. Over the last 9 months, I've put 3,500 miles on my car, traveling all over the county to meet people in Fairfax County and find out what their concerns are. I'd ask you to vote for me so we can work together to improve environmental quality in Fairfax County. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. Mr. Lamb.
Thank you. I'd first like to start by thanking the League of Women Voters. As a candidate, and as a candidate 4 years ago, I started to realize how valuable the League was at getting the message out and let candidates like Jerry and Scott and myself that are at the sort of the bottom of the ballot to get out and meet people. I was elected 4 years ago as an elected director. Before that, I was appointed, so I've been in this position for 6 years. I currently serve as the treasurer and as a vice chair, and I'm also chair of the State Association's IT committee. So I know a little bit about how we work. And my platform, in a nutshell, is to really continue doing the work that we've been doing for 70 years. The district is a bipartisan, actually a nonpartisan office. And the way that people interact with the district is really based on trust. We're non-regulatory, so why would anybody call us? Well, the reason is because you trust us and because we have some deep conservation expertise. If you have a problem with runoff in your neighborhood or your house is getting flooded, the district has the conservation experts that can come help you. We also have experts in stream valley restoration, and we're sort of championing some of the novel ways that we're using to protect streams. The other thing I want to bring out is that the way the districts came, we were actually started to stop the Great Dust Bowl, and we're facing similar challenges today. People don't realize the Great Dust Bowl was a huge issue and people didn't understand. But now we're faced with climate change, right? And climate change is just as huge. And the principles of the district, which is local decision making, letting decisions be made by a local board, bipartisanship, nonpartisanship, and then science-based education. The way we solved the Great Dust Bowl was to take the science of conservation and to protect the land. And the way that we're going to address conservation and we're going to address global climate change is to take the science of stopping energy waste and getting carbon out of the air and doing that at a local level everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Peters.
Thank you very much. My name is Jerry Peters. On the ballot, I will show up as Gerald O. Jerry Peters, Jr. So watch for that. I'm an incumbent director. I was appointed in April this year to fill a vacant seat. I've been an associate director since 2009. I've made just about all the meetings and all of the volunteer events which associate directors get to participate in. I've been there for the district. Great deal of fun. The staff at the district are excellent to work with, and we know we're all doing the right thing and we're doing it together. I very much enjoyed doing that. I've been a director since April of this year when I was appointed to a director, so I am an incumbent appointed to this position. I've also been designated by the Soil and Water Conservation District to represent it on the Fairfax County Tree Commission. I've been doing this since 2012. And forest, in fact, one of my main interests in environmental protection right now. My experience goes back decades. I've been doing environmental work since before environmental was the state of the art. I got out of University of Virginia in 1967 and immediately went into the Army and was a preventive medicine specialist. And ever since I've been doing public health and environmental science work. I have a master's degree in environmental science and engineering from VPI, and I have 30 years of experience as a professional environmental consultant doing contracts for federal and state agencies. So I come to the job with a great deal of technical preparation. Since retiring in 2004, I've spent an increasing amount of my time volunteering in various things. I helped to set up the first training schedule for the Fairfax Master Naturalist. I lecture on biogeography, land use, and urban systems for the Master Naturalist, and I'm currently working on forest issues throughout the county. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. The first question to you: what can be done to prevent excess tree removal on the tear down and rebuild lots?
That's a very significant question. I appreciate that. I think one thing we need to do, not just the Soil and Water Conservation Board, but in conjunction with the Tree Commission and the other county agencies, is make sure that we're pursuing strategies that preserve as many trees as possible. Outside the context of that particular development situation, I met with a number of citizens in the McLean area recently. The county is potentially going to be restoring Dead Run. In the process, they're going to be clear cutting virtually all the trees in the floodplain. I think we need to look for other alternatives to restore our riparian areas to avoid removal of trees that have been standing there for decades, if not hundreds of years.
Thank you.
This is an area where the Conservation District really can play a role, and that's primarily because trees are incredibly valuable, and people don't realize what trees do. They don't realize.
Is that better?
Yes.
People don't realize that trees are like so valuable. They can protect your energy because they stop the sun coming in. They protect your soils from the rain coming down. And trees are an important part of the overall storm preservation or storm mitigation efforts. The other thing people don't realize is that storms in stream valleys, trees in stream valleys protect the stream banks. So it's the education aspect that the Conservation District, we're non-regulatory, so when it comes to like putting laws in place to stop tree removal, we don't have a say. But we are education-based and we're outreach-based. So that's where we have the biggest play. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Peters.
Thank you. As the district's representative on the Tree Commission, we discussed the infill issue repeatedly. We're holding a series of forums around the county, co-sponsored with the Urban Forest Management Division. And one of the issues that comes up, particularly in McLean, but all the older subdivisions, suburbs, where old houses are being torn down and houses twice the size are being put up, encroaching on trees, is there. The Dillon Rule currently keeps us from having a real hammer to prevent the loss of many of these large urban trees and putting very large houses on small lots. We've been asked by Sharon Bulova and Supervisor John Faust, the commission has, not the district, to propose ways that we could ask the legislature to give us the tools to deal with infill development.
Thank you. Mr. Lamb, you get the first question this time. Do you believe the quality of our streams and lakes is adequately protected? Why or why not?
They are certainly not adequately protected. The primary reason, and I mean, Jerry mentioned this a little bit earlier, if you look at how neighborhoods are redeveloped, our neighborhoods were engineered 30 years ago, and everything made sense when we had small houses. All of a sudden we have large houses, and large houses have more impact on the runoff. And then you have lots more runoff coming down, and that runoff just hits the streams. And they're not protected because we're not used to having big houses. So I think clearly that ordinance is not sufficient to protect our streams. The redevelopment ordinance is not sufficient. Once again, the district can't affect this, but we don't have the ordinance in place that really can protect us. The best thing that we can do is get the advice so when your neighborhood gets run off, we can help you do it. I mean, it's really going to be a voluntary effort, and it's got to be done by yourself, because until we can change the regulations, and I don't see that happening, we're going to be facing a lot of issues with stormwater runoff.
Thank you. Mr. Peters.
I want to make the point that Fairfax County has got the best soil erosion control ordinances that we can, given the state rule. But the runoff from urban areas is not just a function of the new house going in or the new shopping center being built. It's everyone who already owns forest. It's everyone who already owns land, and whether they take care of it properly or not. This is a role the district has played for a long time, is public education. What kind of stewards should we be of the land that we own? And I think you'll see more of that coming from the district. It has been coming for a long time. Many of the programs are focused just on that thing, soil erosion control. We'll be doing more of it.
Thank you. Mr. Cameron.
The quality of our watersheds varies a great deal from one part of the county to another. There was a study done by the county government around 5 years ago that shows a map of water quality across Northern Virginia. About a third of our watersheds are in decent shape, about a third of our watersheds are in good shape, and about a third of our watersheds are in pretty poor shape. One of the things I would like to see the Soil and Water Board do is, as my colleagues have indicated, provide an educational service so our county government and our homeowners associations and our nonprofits can focus on those watersheds that are in the worst shape and really put priority on those and figure out ways that we can make a difference in those watersheds. I think we need to be a force for education, but we also need to be a catalyst. We're the only elected officials countywide who are elected specifically to pursue an environmental agenda, and I think part of our opportunity is to be catalysts for the rest of the county government.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Peters, you're going to get this question first. What are your priorities for helping the district to prepare for and manage climate change?
The district, unfortunately, does not have any kind of regulatory role. My personal feeling is that climate change is going to need some very strong regulations nationally. Since we don't have a regulatory role, we're kind of out of that. But again, our role is educational. And I think when we focus the citizens' attention on their own personal responsibility for the land they own, the waters that run off the land, and the climate they're dealing with, the energy that they use that contribute to climate change, then that's what the district can do. It's a matter of education.
Thank you.
Not regulation.
Mr. Cameron.
Two thoughts come to mind. While the board certainly does not have any regulatory authority in this area, through its educational programs and our other activities, we can promote ecosystem resiliency, if you will. We can promote biological diversity in our ecosystems that will enable them to cope more easily with whatever environmental changes they encounter, whether it's driven by climate change or hurricanes or other disruptive phenomenon.
Thank you. Mr. Lamb.
So I think climate change is the biggest disaster that's waiting to happen. And it's something that we've known about. That's the funny thing about these big disasters. We've known about it for a long time. We're finally starting to come to grips with it. I believe some kind of national policy, a cap and trade, or some kind of policy that addresses the big issues, that's necessary. But the other thing you have to realize is that when carbon's created, it's usually created for someone to use it. Right? So when you turn on a light, there's carbon created, and that's contributing to global warming. The energy of your house, and there's new passive standards for houses where you can get a zero footprint house. When you travel in an airplane, you can do mitigation to offset. So there's so many things that actually carbon usage is driven by humans. I mean, it's us. If we weren't here, there'd be no climate problems. So we need to understand what we're doing it. We need to educate it. And I also believe the way that the districts are designed to be trustful organizations at a local level, I think we are one of the linchpins for getting money from the national government down to efforts that can help address climate change at a local level.
Thank you very much. So during the next 4 years, if you were elected, what would be your top 3 priorities?
My top 3 priorities would, first of all, and I really appreciate the question, would be to make sure, to the extent we can, that the board and the rest of the county government agencies that have environmental roles, environmental programs, are encouraged to focus as much as possible on our watersheds that are in the worst condition. We need to put our money where the problems are, and I think that's probably the best way to improve the overall quality in Fairfax County. Certainly dealing with invasive species is an important issue. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service says that more than 40% of our endangered species are endangered because some invasive has done something to them. It's either eaten them or taken over their habitat. So you look at our watersheds where we have hydrilla problems, where we have bamboo problems, the list goes on and on. Doing what we can to restore the Northern Virginia ecosystem so that it really is reminiscent of what belongs here, I think is another thing that we can do. The third thing that I would do is I would work with, on a bipartisan basis, with our Democrats and Republicans in the General Assembly to make sure that the policy and laws coming out of Richmond work for a suburbanized area like Fairfax County. Frankly, they don't always work for us.
Okay, Mr. Lamb.
Thank you. So my three priorities. The first one is fairly straightforward. It's to continue good governance, right? To make sure that the dollars that Fairfax County gives us, that the state gives the district, are well spent. And I'm going to continue that as the treasurer's role, where we've re-looked at how we do all of our accounting and our budgeting, and making sure that it's very transparent and all of our programs are directly tied to our strategic plan. So that's a continuation of what we're doing right now. The second priority is something I'm doing with the IT committee across the entire state, and that's looking at the Chesapeake Bay and understanding how things that are touching the bay through voluntary practices are aggregated and are modeled so our understanding of the bay gets better. We, as districts around the state, everybody puts practices in place, and we give money for people to stop runoff and to put fences in, but none of that's tracked, and there's no data aggregation where you can actually see what the effect is. So I think we need to start applying some of the big data science technology across the state and aggregating that.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
And the third one is starting to look at some of these harder problems. You know, how can the district play in the climate change model? Maybe to branch out a little bit, and that's my third priority.
Thank you. Mr. Peters.
Thank you very much for the question. I would say there are three things I would want to continue. The district is already doing an excellent job in these three areas, and I want to see it continue. First is we are a trusted partner. Other agencies as well as the public, I think, take the district as an honest partner in learning and doing what's right for the environment. The second is I'd like to increase the sense of personal stewardship that citizens in Fairfax County feel for their environment. Not only their backyards, but what I call the public lands, our public estate. We have a tremendous amount of parkland in Fairfax County that would certainly benefit from individuals paying attention to it, using it, and caring for it. And third, I think we continue to provide useful information to the public on how to do these things. If you go to the district's website and look at all the many brochures and information products that they've been developing over the last several years, I want more of it, and I want it to be as good as it has been in the past.
Thank you. Mr. Cameron. All right. Would you describe a watershed that is in bad shape, and what are the solutions to make it better?
One example would be the watersheds in the Mount Vernon area. And one of the primary reasons for that is because of the extensive development, frankly, since the 1800s. We have a lot of impervious surfaces. We've got a lot of asphalt. We've got a lot of concrete. So the stormwater that falls, the rainwater that falls in a lot of those communities gets channelized very quickly. It gets dumped at a very heavy speed, very fast speed, into our stream beds and essentially gouges them out, essentially destroying the biological integrity of that stream. So there are a number of things that I think are possibilities. One thing that the board can do is be a source of information on developing technologies that will decrease the impermeability of these areas. For instance, there apparently is a new type of concrete technology that came out that is incredibly absorptive of water. So, perhaps we ought to look at new road development in our most impaired watersheds, taking advantage of that technology if it can be demonstrated to work, to reduce the stormwater discharge gouging out our streams. But we need to be creative. We need to work with the local communities. We need to pay attention to what those homeowners associations are thinking and what they consider their priorities to be.
Thank you. Mr. Lamb.
So the basic idea about a stream is that the amount of impervious surface around that stream is directly correlated to the health of the stream. So once you have about 10% impervious, which means either streets or pavements or parking lots, 10% is when you start to lose all biological life. When you get up to 30%, the stream is effectively flushed out every time there's a major storm event. Right? You get 30% impervious, all of a sudden the water comes in, and all the life is gone from the stream. And then you get the stream banks sort of receding. So that 30% is really the number where things are pretty much gone. So you can look around the county, and Scott mentioned earlier that there is studies and shows where the best county streams are. The best is in the west, and on the east it's a little bit different. I think things that are happening like in Tyson's and Scott Run, that's where we're seeing some really interesting stuff because the renovation of Tyson's is fixing all the stormwater runoff, and we're changing perviousness.
Thank you. Mr. Peters.
Yeah, well, you've heard both candidates say the same thing, and that is that the impervious surfaces increase peak runoff to the point that the channels are changed. And the way they change is they erode down very quickly, leaving very steep banks. The only fix for this is potentially during redevelopment like Tyson's to regrade those stream banks so they're entirely differently configured. This is expensive and it loses trees in doing so. So the real problems involved in correcting this particular problem. Beyond that, again, individuals, how they care for their lawns, what they do with their pet waste, et cetera, are small things that cumulatively could make a big difference. And that's where the personal stewardship comes in.
Thank you. All right. I'll have you go first, and I think for this we need to just limit it to 1 minute. What other issues related to the Soil and Water District would you like to discuss as your final question?
Well, my pet project is trying to restore the health of Fairfax County forests. The understory in our forest has been devastated by large herbivores, also known as deer. And I've been working now for years to try to master that problem and figure out how we can do that on a landscape scale.
Thank you. Mr. Cameron.
I would agree with Jerry that one deer, one Bambi is really cute. 50 or 60 is a problem, especially when they're eating up your garden and everything within their eye shot. So to the extent we can facilitate practices to help restore our forests, both for water quality purposes, for ecosystem and biodiversity purposes, and frankly to protect our gardens. That's a worthy objective as well.
Thank you, Mr. Lamb.
So I think the most important thing the district does is education. When I was in the Sierra Club, I learned that if you pick up anything, it's hitched to everything else in the universe. The connectivity and getting people to understand that everything really is hitched together. The stormwater, the trees, the biodiversity, everything's all connected. And I think we need to continue focusing on the education. We need to get into the schools. We need to get people at the beginning to understand that really is, it's one world and we're all hitched together.
Thank you very much. See, I guess we have 2 minutes left. In 30 seconds, your own choice of topic. Can you think of anything? Okay.
Thanks, George. First of all, what I'd like to say is I hope every citizen in Fairfax County realizes that they can take advantage of the Soil and Water Conservation Board to be a real resource, not only to help you with developmental issues around your own house, but in your homeowner association and the broader community. We are there to help you, and I hope you give me a chance by electing me so I can help you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lamb.
So in 30 seconds, I would implore everyone to vote, to get out and to go meet the candidates, because we care about this. And just getting out of here, you can see the passion from all three of us. You get to vote for 3 conservation directors. So I think you have 3 great people that we're talking to you right now.
Thank you.
I agree with that.
Mr. Peters.
I'm going to second that motion, George. I think that this is the only unpaid office on the ticket. The people up here are people who have dedicated themselves, each of us for a number of years, to working with the district and to understand it and to chip in our 2 cents when it's worth something.
Thank you very much. That's all the time we have. We thank the candidates for taking their time to answer your questions. We also thank the co-sponsors and the staff of Fairfax Public Access Television. Good night.